So the FinTech Hub sessions have been taking place across the Innotribe this week. On Monday, we did Canada. Yesterday, we did the APAC region. And today is the turn of EMEA. What's going on in the Nigerian FinTech ecosystem?
So Nigeria is by far the most active entrepreneurial cluster in Africa, especially with regards to FinTech. So there was Vanso, that was acquired by InterSwitch, and then Flutterwave is the rave around the continent now that provides a unified set of APIs for different sets of players in the ecosystem to make payments. I'm not aware of any specific fintech-only hub in Nigeria, but then when you look at Lagos, which is the epicenter, CC Hub will be the most prominent one. And the thing that is interesting about the hub in Nigeria is that it has been driven almost entirely from the entrepreneurial community. In fact, the government was forced to give attention to the startup ecosystem when we had the likes of Mark Zuckerberg come to Lagos. And instead of first visiting the president or the governor of Lagos State, the first place he went to was CC Hub. And he met with the developers and then visited Andela, walked along the road, jumping over the puddles of water. And only after that did he go to visit the government officials. And after that, you see these government officials calling the startup ecosystem to say, okay, how can we help? So I think that's a very interesting model.
The Nordics has always been at the forefront of technology innovation. We've got a high proportion of unicorns per head, and I think, in fact, Sweden has the highest proportion of unicorns per head. You know, we've got Klarna, we've got Spotify, we've got Tradeshift. But until recently, we didn't have dedicated fintech hubs in the region. The Copenhagen hub has just celebrated its first birthday this week. Last week, I missed the party, unfortunately. And the Stockholm hub is less than a year old. So although we've got a lot of dedicated working spaces for startups, this is really new in the fintech area. And we have a massive amount of innovation and creativity, particularly in the financial technology area, going on. We've got over 500 fintech startups in the region, which in a region of 27 million people is phenomenal. And about half of those are based in Sweden, which is the biggest growth area. Having said that, Copenhagen is rapidly becoming crypto island. We've got a lot of blockchain companies in the fintech hub where I sit there. And in Stockholm, we have the world's first green digital finance center. Which is a not-for-profit focused on applying financial technology, fintech ideas to the sustainability agenda. And through that, we're working very closely with the United Nations, and we've been able to build a broad collaborative network, which I'll talk about in a minute. So although we're very young, we're growing very rapidly. Both of the hubs in Copenhagen and Stockholm are expanding at a rate of knots, both in floor space and in number of tenants. We're working very closely with governments, with regulators, and with the local commercial banks. So in Stockholm, we have all of the big banks coming in. We have several in Copenhagen as well. Very close collaboration with the universities, and again, in particular in Copenhagen, fantastic collaboration there. And yeah, it's just been very, very positive for us with commercial and public organizations.
Yeah, exactly. It's not limited to, that you're part of one hub. I'm part of the Innovate Finance Hub as a global ambassador. I'm part of the Financial Service Roundtable in the US. So being connected in the different networks is key, because it's personal relationships, you know each other, and it's a global business, especially in the technology that I'm in. And I would say in addition to that is coming from the Crypto Valley perspective is two dimensions. Additionally, I would say because it's a wide space, the whole token economy, it's because there is over 4 years expertise in the legal and regulation part, is sharing recommendation frameworks that we have developed over the last few months with the different central banks. So we are in really contact with the central banks. We get a lot of requests out of different regions to discuss and explain more our framework, how tokens should be classified, how the token should be regulated, and because there's a lot of questions, also lack of information, I would say, and this will help us to make sure that the model will mature and become really a professional business. Even then also we get a lot of requests out of different regions to work on the code of conduct for ICOs. Because there's a need to...
Do you mind defining ICOs? Just
ICO is,
people in the audience
initial coin offering. That's a new way to get funding or issue a token as a utility token to get paid, for example. So it's a new way of to get funded, operate, etc. So there's a different version of usage of those tokens. And again, it's open up a capital pool globally that usually are constrained through the VCs.
Right.
And so, as I said before, this is something that it's enabling the startups to get access to it. It needs improvement, it needs regulation, but our job is to share the learning curve because, again, the foundation, the Ethereum Foundation was built up 4 years ago in Switzerland to share that. The second dimension, I would say, is R&D research. Because this is not only a startup development initiative, there's a lot of going on in the universities. And so we teamed up with the IEEE organization, the Engineering Standardization Organization, to have the first blockchain conference next year coming from a R&D academia perspective. So we have around about 20 professors in universities in our scientific advisory board to pick the next trend in that area. And we have already started call out for papers to submit out of the universities, and the best 20 will be presented next year. So that's a way also to look into what's coming down the road maybe in 12, 24 months. So that's something that is not a local university theme, it's a connected network of universities.
And James, the Barclays Rise program is a program with Techstars and Barclays coming together. So for those in the audience that aren't aware, Techstars builds innovation programs for corporates. So when you started that journey a few years ago to now, how's it been? And would you rather have done it in-house yourselves fully, or having someone from Silicon Valley help you do that? How has that been?
I don't think we would have done it ourselves, quite frankly. I think that Techstars have brought a huge amount of competency to our environment. They've helped us lift certainly the thinking in the organization, as well as what's going on in the broader community in Cape Town and in Africa. I think, I like the point where you mentioned that a whole lot of banks are getting together. I don't think we're there yet in Africa. We're still kind of chasing each other, I think. But the next evolution of that model, I think, is absolutely how we start getting a lot of banks in our own environment into these hubs. We start solving common problems. We get government a little bit more involved. So I see a huge opportunity in that space. The other thing when we talk about collaboration, I think the huge benefit we're seeing, and we didn't really see this when we entered this journey, was that bringing a lot of our own clients into this environment and connecting them with the fintechs and the global kind of Rise community. What we're starting to see is adjacent revenue opportunities, business models potentially evolving. And I think that's quite a nice spin-off where we didn't go in thinking that was what we're going to do, but we're seeing huge benefit coming out of that space.
What do you think the types of supports in your different regions are needed for public and private partnerships?
So what you outlined, there's different ways to set it up.
Yeah.
You can hope that the government is waking up and somebody is doing this, which is more an exception. Asia is doing, Singapore is doing well from that perspective, or you have a public company or private company to try to set up, or I've been through this the last few months, is grassroots. So you have 5-10 people passionate about the topic, understanding now how to describe and mobilize an ecosystem. And with that momentum, you can grow and get support out of different areas. So something that, again, last year I couldn't see that, but it's possible if you have people running this kind of, I would say, almost like a startup. No? So you start from scratch, you build your network, you position, like an open source, you have working groups working on various topics, utilize that as a momentum and get started.
Fabien?
Maybe if I can come back for a minute on what you said about competition and what you said about universities. The way we see collaboration is our clients, the banks, the insurers, the market infrastructure, they are global. The investors, they are global. The startup and scale-up, they want to be global. So you can't address this by offering a kind of country-only vertical protective approach. So because your clients don't want that, so you have to collaborate.
Yeah.
It's true that every city wants to shine as a fintech hub because it has some economical impact, but I think Europe needs that collaboration if we want to retain or at least grow the technology industry in general. We have to collaborate. And I think the universities, if we just look for a minute at universities, they have been doing that forever. They have been sending researchers from university in Bologna up to the Nordics and vice versa. European students have their Erasmus program since I don't know many years. I don't see why we couldn't do the same, and we do, but I think we can do more. Having more interchanges between hubs, as from the moment they are assets that are complementary and they are common goals.
Token is a Silicon Valley open banking startup with offices in London, and we actually have bank money as part of the first investment raise. So we raised 18.5 million in April, and that was from purely European investors. So the OP Bank in Finland, they gave us some money. So did EQT Ventures from Sweden, they gave us some money, and so did Octopus Ventures from the UK. So as a Silicon Valley company working on a European problem, we have money from all over Europe, as well as American money as well from seed level. So we're actually a classic example of that happening. And from a talent perspective, we have talent from all over the world. Russians, Argentinians, Brazilians, Brits, and quite a mix.
That's the reason why I am personally biased in favor of ecosystems and hubs that grow from the grassroots. There's a community-driven effort. That way you can keep your vision. The vision is not being dictated or influenced by some public body or by a big corporate. They only come to you because they've seen the impact that you're making already. And in that sense, you run the hub or the ecosystem like another startup on its own. And startup entrepreneurs and people that get things done, they like to get things done. They don't have time for long bureaucracy and long meetings. So if you have a community-driven effort, you have a better chance of actually getting things done because you are focused on scaling or providing value. You're not so encumbered with protectionist and nationalistic or some other. I mean, you're not worried about the next election, right?
Not particularly.
But if it's been dictated by the government, these are some of the practical considerations that will affect how the direction goes.
Yeah, and that's why you shouldn't be a government-owned institution. And of course, all the startup hubs are also startups. I mean, in each case, they're a group of people who've come together with a vision and an idea. I mean, in many cases, yes, there's been a government paper that says we really need a hub, but that doesn't happen in isolation, and it doesn't happen without the entrepreneurs founding it, building it, bringing in the ecosystem, bringing in the startups and making it happen. So yeah, I mean, hubs are startup organizations run by startups for startups.
It would be great to sort of understand what sort of the key challenges or pain points that you're having in your hubs are. Who would like to start?
I'll have a go.
Go for it, James.
Tying on to that last conversation, being maybe the only current banker on the panel, I mean, we are under pressure to show value, and how we measure that value, it has to be commercial in nature at some level. Also, obviously, we're trying to stimulate the entrepreneurship ecosystem in our environment. We're also trying to learn. So value for us is, Bipin, my friend from Wells Fargo, calls it ROI, return on innovation, where we are looking for those metrics, and we will manage through these cycles a little bit. So I think one challenge for us is making sure as a bank we're very clear on what we're trying to achieve and that we are quite focused on the outcome. The other thing for us particularly, and I think this is maybe an African thing, obviously, we haven't really got the regulatory component right. So we've been trying to take the regulator on the journey with us. South Africa is quite unique. Our president there changes his cabinet every couple of weeks, depending on his mood, which is a challenge for us when you're talking about frontier technologies, or you're trying to shift some policy thinking, where every time you get in a room with the regulators, it's different people. So we have that real challenge in Africa, and I think skills will always be a gap. So we have great entrepreneurs, we've got good SMEs in the banks. There will be certain competencies that we would need to tap into like a global network for, and that could be in data science, it could be in other competencies.
Yeah, and skills and labour mobility is a general challenge.
Omid, just to get your voice in there.
I think that Nigeria is probably going to be the youngest startup ecosystem in this group. So the challenge in Nigeria is you're trying to build all the component parts of the ecosystem at the same time with little or no tangible support, right? So you find that even the hubs themselves are dealing with some of the problems that the startups are dealing with. My friend runs CC Hub that I mentioned, and one of these days I was there and he was telling me the amount of money that they spend on fueling the generator for the startups to work, and that is like a big headache. So you have young entrepreneurs, you need mentoring for them, but you need local and specific expertise from people who have done those kind of businesses in that environment, not some guy coming from Harvard or MIT or from London. No, someone that has done this in Lagos, and you don't have enough of those. The community has really risen up to provide that mentorship. But then, I mean, when the entrepreneur goes beyond that stage, then you need capital, which is really a big problem. It's not just a buzzword in Lagos. You need capital to get things going, and the capital is not readily available. There's a local angel network that is growing up, but there's still a lot of deficiency in that. Then, of course, when you're talking about fintech specifically, then you also need to get the buy-in of the government and the regulators and the banks, and that is a totally different headache on its own.